enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. Good morning, America. Thank you for riding with us this morning. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'm your host here. And I'm glad that you've joined us this morning because we're going to talk about an important topic. You've joined us in the third of our four segments. You can catch the segments that you've missed up on our website. And then we have on the right side of our site, we've got a little widget up there that allows you to play the YouTube videos that we post every morning. Of course, you always have the option to dial into our listen line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's totally free for you to use it. You can simply dial 415-325-0725. That's 415-325-0725. When you call that listen line, you can hear the entire show, all of it in its entirety, simply by dialing in. So if you're on a long ride or if you're outside of our broadcast radio terrestrial broadcast area and you'd like to listen to a show, or if you miss one and you just want to catch up, you can use that listen line. Again, it's 415-325-0725. Write it down and or give it to some friends and say, hey, here's an opportunity for you to listen to a host that maybe isn't in our area, or, if they don't have internet access, whatever. You can also listen to our show live every morning from 8 to 10 Central. You can find it on americasvoicenow.org. You can also find it playing on Patriot FB. Patriot FB is a great website where it's basically like Facebook, but it's only Patriots. And there's no drones, there's no trolls, there's no censorship, none of that nonsense. And I encourage you to join up over there. It's only been in existence for a short period of time, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of new members who have joined up just in the last couple of months. And so I encourage you to be one of them. You'll meet a bunch of great people up there. And here's the cool part. They have a radio program called Patriot Radio, and you can simply go to their to the website for that radio system. It's patriotfb.com/radio. And you can listen to, on the internet, of course, you can listen to me do a program from 8 to 10 in the morning. Then after that, Tom Lacavara comes on, and he's got Resurrect the Republic from 10 to 11. Tom is also on Republic Broadcasting. Then there's music from 11 to 2. Then after that is J.J. McCartney from 2 to 4 o'clock. J.J.'s a seasoned radio guy. He's been doing this for 30 years. From 4 to 9 o'clock is music, and then at 9 o'clock comes on The Midnight Patriot with Jeff Norton. These are all great radio programs, and these are Patriots. And they all come to it from a different perspective to give you an opportunity to hear different voices and different understanding of different issues. But all of us have one thing in mind. Our government is a nation in distress. Our country is in distress, I should say. Our government is corrupt and has the stench of death and corruption as an aura that hangs over it. Like that kid from the Charlie Brown cartoons who's got that cloud that hangs over him. I can't think of his name. But, that kid walks around and he's got Pigpen. He's got a cloud of dust that everywhere he goes follows him around. Hey, folks, that is the aura and the stink and the stench of corruption and death that exudes and emanates off of your entire government. Every aspect of it. State, federal, makes no difference. They're all in this. They're all shuffling your money around. They're all seizing and burying, the things that are needed to be done to restore this nation to some form of liberty and freedom. And I'm going to prove it to you right now. The Supreme Court, by the way, is no respecter of justice, because they have just refused to hear one of the most important cases on police brutality and abuse and the rising police state in America. Here's what it was. They refused to hear this case on no-knock police raids because the cops claimed, and the lower courts have upheld this, that If there is a legal owned firearm in the premise, the cops don't have to knock. All they got to do is pound the door through, and they come through with one of those battering rams. They smash through the door, and they come pouring in like a group of Nazi stormtroopers, all jacked up and loaded up. You know, they got testosterone pouring out of them. They've got, most of these guys are steroidal roid heads. And they are absolutely determined to come in there and play military soldier. The problem is that we're not foreigners in some foreign land who are insurgents like in Iraq or Afghanistan or some other place. These are our fellow citizens, our alleged fellow countrymen. But you see, no matter where you are in society, no matter where you are, no matter how advanced your civilization, there's always this group of psychiatric fence sitters. They're always between insane and proper, appropriate action within the public sphere. And for some reason, law enforcement seems to draw these knuckleheads. I got to tell you, I have a friend of mine who used to work for the L.A. Police Department. And he said to me, well, you know, I said to him, I don't understand why they don't have these very strict psychological evaluations that have to, he said, well, in LA PD, they do. You have to take 2 of them. I said, well, obviously they're not working. I mean, if you've got, all these nutcases running around in LAPD who are, and obviously, folks, if you don't believe me, just go to YouTube and type in LAPD police brutality. I mean, it's legion. Yesterday, for the record, and I'll bet you didn't hear this, Baltimore settled with the guy who was taking a video with his cell phone, and they didn't like it. And they said, you don't have the right to do that. And the Supreme Court's already ruled a long time ago that you do. Anytime a law enforcement officer is on duty, and you have the right to videotape them with a camera, with a cell phone, you can audio tape and videotape. If they are in the performance of their duty, you have a right to videotape, and you don't have to, notify them, get anybody's permission, none of that. It doesn't apply because they are public figures executing, theoretically, the public's preservation and protection. But the problem is, these cops don't like it when they're videotaped because they don't like seeing themselves show up on YouTube. So they beat the snot out of this. They grabbed this guy's phone. They wiped out all of the stuff on it. And he finally got it to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says, no, if you're in the performance of your duties, people can videotape you just like the media can. So Baltimore refused to acknowledge that anyway, and they beat a guy up and took his stuff. And they just settled the lawsuit. $220,000 in legal fees they had to pay, plus $25,000 as a we're sorry fee. And they had to submit a memo to every law enforcement officer in their department that said, going forward, here's the rules. The Supreme Court says that you can be videotaped. If you don't like that, you can quit. But we're telling you right now that under no circumstances may you take anyone's phone, may you do anything that would be untoward. You are to treat citizens like the media, and you are not to seize their equipment if they are videotaping you. If you don't like it, too bad. All right, sounds good. Here's the problem. Baltimore's the only one to have done it, number one. Number two, in this case, the cops are actually in this Supreme Court. Well, it's not a Supreme Court case because the Supreme Court has rejected hearing it, which means that they are tacitly agreeing to the lower court's ruling because they know that now the lower court's ruling will stand and it will be used as precedent across every district in the United States. You watch and see. This is the new norm now. Here's what it is. In this case, this guy, a guy named Mr. Quinn, he's sitting there at his house. He's a registered gun owner, right? He's got firearms in his home, and he lives in Texas in Collin County. This is back in 2006. So the cops get a tip-off from some, informant that his kid might have illegal drugs in the house. Now, what they did is they went to the court and they got themselves a warrant, and the warrant said, you have to knock and inform them that you're there. But since we know that Mr. Quinn has guns, you don't have to knock. What? Nothing was to... Mr. Quinn's not a criminal. And Mr. Quinn has no... he's not prohibited from owning firearms. He's not obligated to notify them he has them. None of that. So for those of you that say, well, registration's not such a bad idea, you're a fool. And this is why. So here's what happens. The cops go there. They waited, by the way, until the middle of the night. They didn't do this at, 5 or 6 o'clock at night. They didn't, wait until 8 o'clock in the morning. They did this in the dead of night, right? Stormtroopers, blacked out uniforms, fully automatic weapons, the whole 9 yards. And they forcibly pounded in this guy's door with a battering ram. And so Quinn doesn't know what the heck is going on. He wakes up in the middle of the night. He hears his home being ransacked and these people pouring into his house. He reaches for a gun, and cops shoot him. He thought he was being robbed. So they spent all this time and all this money, 8, 10, I don't know how many guys were in there. They raided the house. They turned the whole thing upside down. They found less than a gram of cocaine. And, because Quinn was home and the kid wasn't, they charged Quinn with it. That's how they justified shooting him. Well, he was in possession of cocaine. What a scam. If that's how law enforcement deems doing their job, we got nothing further to talk about. We are living in an absolute totalitarian, dictatorial, monstrous, Stasi-like, KGB-like police state. Now, the Rutherford Institute, which is a civil liberties group that goes out there, not like the ACLU, they go out there and they try to defend, people who they feel have civil liberties issues. And they took up the case and they submitted they submitted a friend of the court brief in support of this application to the Supreme Court to hear the case. In other words, so Quinn said, hey, it's inappropriate that they didn't knock, because if they'd have knocked, I'd have let them in, and just because I owned a gun doesn't make me not entitled to know the rules and the law, and to know that these law enforcement officers are pounding through my house. So, civil rights group Rutherford Institute took up the case following the lower court rejection of Quinn's objection to the no-knock entry. In the petition, the Supreme Court and Rutherford attorneys presented the argument that Americans who legally own firearms and exercise their Second Amendment rights is not sufficient grounds to define police as being in danger during the execution of their search warrants, which is the excuse they used. Thus, attorneys submitted the raid was unconstitutional. John Whitehead, he's the president of the Rutherford Institute. Here's what he said. Whatever the issue might be, whether it's mass surveillance, no-knock raids, the right to freely express one's view about the government, we've moved into a new age in which the rights of the citizenry are being treated as a secondary concern by the White House, by Congress, the courts, and their vast holding of employees, including all of the agencies and law enforcement officials. The disconnect, of course, is that the Constitution establishes a far different scenario in which government officials, including the police, are supposed to be accountable to we the people. For it to be otherwise, for government concerns to trump individual freedoms, with government officials routinely sidestepping the Constitution and reinterpreting law for their own purposes, it makes a mockery of everything this nation is supposed to stand for: self-government, justice, and the rule of law. So, the Supreme Court has now approved of the use of no-knock raids on your home. By the way, John Whitehead, the president of the Rutherford Institute, he's the author of a book called A Government of Wolves: The Emerging American Police State. Now, this guy's fairly well-noted and well-known legal scholar. And I would encourage, you can get his book on Amazon or any other place you want to get it. But it's about $16. And it's a pretty heavy book. I would encourage you to read it. I've actually tried to get a copy of it. I spend everything I've got on this show trying to keep you guys educated. So I don't have a lot of money to drop books. If somebody out there's got a copy, please mail it to me. You can send it to me at America's Voice Now, P.O. Box 1195 in West Plains, Missouri, 65775. And you can send me an email telling me it's on the way, and then you'll save me from having to go continue to scrounge around to find one. My email is mike@americasvoicenow.org. I also would like to hear from you about this or any other radio program that you've heard with us, and whether or not you think we're doing a good job, a bad job. You got constructive criticism, I'm open to that. I'm not a professional radio anything, folks. I'm only doing this because, frankly, I got sick and tired of waiting around for America to stand up and say, don't you all see what's going on around us? And nobody else is stepping up to the plate. I mean, yeah, you got Mark Levin out there, and you got Rush Limbaugh, and you got Glenn Beck, and you got Sean Hannity, and you got... But you know what? Those people aren't calling treason when they see it. They're not saying that Harry Reid's a traitor. They're not using those words. They throw Harry under the bus, but they're always very careful about how they hedge it. Let me tell you something. The truth of the matter is, we live in a nation that is so absorbed and so tyrannical at this point that we are just literally steps away from an Italian fascist, a Stasi-like East Germany, a KGB-like Russia. What more are you waiting for? I mean, are you waiting for them to come and kick in your door? Shoot your kid, your wife, your husband? I mean, really, people. And this isn't the first time that the courts have sided multiple, and for all intents and purposes been complicit. They just, this was only a month ago, they just made another ruling that police can search a home without obtaining a warrant if they get the consent of one person in the house. And so let's assume you and your wife are at home. And the cops come there and they say, we'd like to search the house. And you say, get out of here or go get a warrant. Don't come back without one. And then the cops say, you know what, you're going to talk to us like that? We're going to take you in for disturbing the peace. So they pull you out of the house and they go back and they knock on the door and they say, Mrs. Jones, we'd like to search the house now. And she says, oh, okay, I guess so. I don't know. I don't know about any of this. Boom. Supreme Court says, that's okay now. You've been taken out of the picture. All they got to do is find a reason to get you off the premise. And then they can go back and ask whoever is left over there, well, is it okay if we search the house now? Yes, it's okay. Boom, they're in. Don't you see, people, what this has become? I mean, honestly, I got to ask you, what more are you waiting for? By the time it happens to you, it's too late. You can't stand up then because you don't have the money to fight a case like this in the federal courts or even the state courts. Go and talk to an attorney and see how much it's going to cost you to fight a criminal charge. It starts at around $5,000, and that's at a state level. Oh, you have a federal criminal case. Okay, they start at around $25,000, and that's just because you got caught peeing on federal property. If it's anything more serious than that, it starts at about $50,000. Hello? You're going to bankrupt yourself and your family, and at the end of it, you know what you're going to get? I'm going to tell you what you're going to get. You're going to get a federal government or a state government. You're going to get a prosecutor that goes to your attorney and says, look, you know the game. You're one of us. Here's how it works. We're going to give your client a plea agreement, and he's going to agree to serve, 3, 2, 5, 1, 8 years. And if he doesn't, we're going to lap on all of these other charges, and we're going to stack them up. And then we're going to go back and we're going to say, now we're not charging him with 2 things. We're charging him with 11 things. And suddenly the case goes from, let's assume that you could get 5 to 10 years. And they come back and they say, we're going to give you a plea bargain for 3. Right? You say, get out of here. I want to fight the case. And they say, okay, great. Now you're fighting a case with 11 charges, and it's 20 to 30 as the penalty. And they don't care if some of them get dropped in court or you're found not guilty, because all they got to do is throw enough poop against the wall and some of it's going to stick. And by the way, every charge, your attorney says, hey, I need another $8,000 here. There is no justice in this country. Get it through your head. Realize who and what you are. You are food. You are livestock. You are a commodity, like a vegetable to a farmer, to be picked and plucked, to produce or be culled. You got a tomato plant. It's not producing. You pull it out of the ground and you throw it away. Why? Because it's sucking down resources that aren't going to the other tomato plants that are producing. You got a bad apple. When you pull all those apples off the tree, you look at that one, you see a hole in it with a worm in it. You don't save it, you throw it away. You got a cow that's not producing. Cow-calf operation. Well, you're expecting that cow to produce another calf, every 11 months. If that cow goes 14 months and hasn't produced, you're out of here, off to the butcher shop with you. That's how they view you. You are here to generate tax revenue. That's all you're here for. If you don't produce, if you raise your head, if you raise your voice, if you run afoul, you are culled, beaten, abused, charged, discriminated against, tossed out, separated, shunned, culled, and many times murdered. For the record, if you don't remember these statistics, I'm going to give them to you again. Since 2001 and the 9/11 attacks, we have had more people killed here in the United States by our own home police forces, federal and state and city and county and whatever. We've had more people in the United States killed by law enforcement than we lost of soldiers in the entire Iraq War. Hello? What does that statistic tell you? In other words, more Americans have been killed by law enforcement than by Iraqi insurgents in the same period. Something suspicious about that. You're listening to America's Voice. I don't get what America's waiting for here, because at this point, folks, you're either going to stand up and you're going to take your nation, you're going to take your state, you're going to take your county, and you're going to take your city or your town or your village or your unincorporated hamlet, and you're going to take it back. Or you're going to be culled off like a rotten tomato. We'll be back in just a minute. When we come back, we're going to talk about the other piece of news that nobody wants to talk about, and that is that metadata can tell everything about you. And everything contrary to that is a lie.